Welcome to the Curious Builder. I'm Mark Williams, your host, and welcome to Danielle and Micheal. Thanks for coming on, guys.
Thanks
for having us.
So we are in Huntington Beach, California. We are at the Contractors Coalition, the summit, number 2. We met in Nashville at number 1.
We did.
And
across the room.
Across the room. Yep. Now we are up close and personal.
Yep.
I do all my interviews in person with video. So anyone that's listening can go to our website, curiousbuilder.org. And you can see this video if you care to. You'll see this nice sunburn I have today.
Yep. And how close we're sitting.
We're
all
sitting
touching
extremely close. This the set that we wanted to record in was not available, so we'll just have to make do with what we've got.
Well, we're builders, right? Isn't that what we're supposed to do?
We do. We take with what we have and we build something amazing. So this interview is going to be awesome.
I'm here for it. Let's
So
do it.
you guys own and operate Clark and Aldine, and my first question is how did you come up with the name Clark and Aldine? I want the origin story of your company, but let's start with your name.
All right.
So when we decided that we wanted to start a business together, Danielle was adamant that our brand name needed to be something and something, kind of like Crate and Barrel. So whole idea was whatever name we came up with meant nothing of significance to anyone but us. And when we both met in Chicago, I lived in the South Loop on South Clark Street. She lived in Lakeview on Aldine. And the two streets do not intersect. Where Clark and Aldine meet, on the other side of Clark is school. Aldine turns into school. So while those streets don't intersect, that's where our paths intersected.
And so that's how we branded us. And then from there, what we did is any project that we have now, we name the same way. So it is a street that's sentimental to our clients, and then a street that they are currently living on.
I love that. That is I love how you've taken your name branding and then you job site branded as well.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I bet your clients respond really positively.
It's really cool because a lot of times we have clients come in and they already know what their name is going to be.
Oh, that's amazing. Because the story is, do you guys talk about your story on Instagram or your social feeds or on the website?
Yeah, we've talked about it. It's on our website. It's on social.
Yeah, we have a whole blog post about it. And then
we
link out to each project that we've done. Probably should update that now that I'm saying that out loud.
That's amazing. I kind of want to see if I can do that. That's really neat.
And it's cool because then you get to really intimately know your clients too, because they always give you the backstory of what their significant street is and why they're choosing that street.
Yep.
And then recently we've actually had a lot of Chicago streets.
Okay.
And so that's always fun too.
How often do people address you as Clark and you as Aldine?
Not as much as they used to in the beginning. But you can always tell when an email is automated. We all get junk emails, and now we're getting all the random junk calls every day for $3 million loans at 3.2% interest over 30 years, and they know nothing about our financials. But we used to get asked all the time. I would get referred to as Clark, or they would ask, okay, who's Clark and who's Aldine? So we'd have to tell the story, which is why we updated our site and came up.
Well, and then our team talked a lot about like really focusing on saying like we're Micheal and Danielle Gutelli versus Clark and Aldine as our name. And so actually when we were in Minnesota with you earlier, Morgan introduced us from Construction to Style, introduced us as Clark and Aldine, and we were like, or Micheal and Danielle Gutelli, and she like didn't get it. And she's like, but that's your brand name. I was like, yeah, but see, people think we're Clark and Aldine when you say that. She's like, I didn't even think of that.
Well, I love it. I'm here for it. I really want to give that a second look for even like branding, because whenever we're coming up with like on the portfolio, you're coming up with like, and you kind of get tired of transitional cottage, this traditional house. And you kind of see the same words over and over. So like, and you don't want to use the client's name to brand it, because that becomes a privacy issue.
Yep.
And so you don't want to be like house number 1. I love that this is both really engaging but has a story. And I love that your clients have bought into this.
And we do have some clients in the past and some current clients where the privacy is a concern. So we used origins of the street name of significance and the current street name just to kind of throw people off.
So internally it's
Yeah.
whatever their name was, but like when I'm sharing it on social media,
We
we're
change
not
it up.
changing. We're not doing it based on like each of our clients' individual needs.
Yeah, and we never show clients or an address of a house ever. That's in basically in our standards. We'll never do that.
Unless they're okay with it.
Yeah.
Then I'll do that.
Now then I will. Now you guys have you mentioned that you started this when you first met. Were you dating and started a building company?
No,
or were you
no,
married
no,
at
no.
this time?
We were married, I don't know, what, 7 or 8 years when we started this?
Yeah. So actually, Mike and I both come from different careers. So I taught second grade for 10 years in Chicago, and then Michael was in marketing and advertising. And when we left Chicago, we had just had our first little guy, and we decided to move back to Michigan, which is where I'm from. And Michael was like, well, why don't you start that blog you always talked about? I was like, okay.
And the real reason that was a possibility is because the new job in Michigan paid us more than we made combined.
In
Or paid me
Chicago.
more than we
Yeah.
made combined in Chicago.
Right.
So it was a no-brainer. Like, start this. If we're ever going to do it, start it now.
And
Right.
so that's kind of how Clark and Aldine started off this blog.
That's amazing.
And so at
What was
first,
the blog? What was the topic?
it was called Mom, Wife, Foodie. And I wrote about being a mom, a wife, and a foodie. And I wrote on Monday, Wednesday, Fridays.
Yeah.
And for 2 years, I wrote, and I think Michael and my mom and maybe one of my girlfriends came and read the post. And then it kind of like little by little started to take its own turn. And I went to a conference, and during the conference, one of the speakers talked about looking at your analytics. And I was like, analytics, huh? So I like went home, I'm like, do we have analytics? And he's like, Danielle, every site has analytics. And I was like, well, we should look at ours, because they say if only people are coming to one post, then we're writing about the wrong things. So sure shit, we go to the blog and we look up the analytics, and everybody's coming to this master bedroom reveal post that we had done on our house. And so then we kind of chatted, and we're like, well, maybe Michael should write more on the blog, and maybe we should rebrand it a little bit. And at this time, we already had Clark and Aldine. Like, we already had that as a name in our business, because the goal was for us to work together. We knew that that's what we wanted to do, and we wanted to build a lifestyle that Michael and I could work together, and we could spend quality time with our children, and we could basically write our own story.
That's amazing. So you knew you wanted a business, you had the name of the business, but you didn't know what the business was.
Yes, and so we dabbled with lots of things, from like family photography to website building. We shot for restaurants, we ran social media.
So for 3 years, the big thing we were doing was what I was doing for my day job.
Right.
Marketing, advertising, social and digital. And it was a full 40-hour job on top of my career.
Right.
So, I mean, it's our story of 10,000 hours. For 5 years, we put in that work until we got to the point where it was like, all right, we're 35. If we don't risk it now, we're not going to be able to do it.
And so when we started to blog about our home content, the beauty was like Michael wasn't like just this guy DIYing everything.
Yeah, that's one point I want to hit on. This wasn't like a DIY blog. I mean, yes, we did some DIY things, but that's not how it started. When I was 14, I got a job as a laborer on the job site, just picking up trash, cleaning up, getting beers for the guys at 5 o'clock, because that happened then, doesn't happen anymore. And this was in St. Louis, where I come from. When I graduated high school at 18, I was making more money than I knew what to do with. So I was like, screw college. I love this. I'm not going to do anything other than this. I had all the toys. I traveled, cars, money in my pocket. Life was great. Mm-hmm. There was no risk. It was beautiful.
Did you work for like a single builder, or did you?
I worked for a custom home builder.
Okay.
And when I was 18 and graduated, I was running the drywall crew, in charge of that, and I consistently was stepping up every year.
So you were a project manager at that point.
Basically.
Yeah.
Yep. I was still doing some labor, but mostly managing projects, and I loved it. But the custom home market in St. Louis in 2000, that was 2001, 2003, just slowed down a bit, and I was burnt out because I was working 7 days a week.
Yeah.
And my other passion was graphic design, so I initially went to college in Chicago at Columbia for graphic design. But I didn't learn more than what I already knew in 2 years, so I switched that to marketing comms with an emphasis in advertising, and that's what led to the career.
And so it's really fun to look at your story like backwards, because I always say, like, if you look at it forward, it doesn't really make sense, but as you're going backwards, I'm like, oh my goodness, this makes so much
Stuff
sense.
starts to fall into place.
Yeah, and so when we were blogging, Michael was actually doing things that he legit knew how to do, and then local people started asking us if we'd ever consider doing this with anybody else, and then it was like almost like that click for the two of us, like, this is what we need to be doing.
Yep.
And so we set a goal.
Yeah, set a goal. Pardon for the cough, allergies. I set a goal and I said November 2nd, I'm done. Actually, I said November 1st. And my last day at the agency was November 2nd. So I missed it by one day. It was a failure.
No, you weren't.
Failure in your milestone of walking out. I like it.
But the hardest thing was getting my builder's license. Because in Michigan, I don't know how it is in Minnesota, it's a 60-hour course. I obviously took it at night.
Yep.
And finished all my classes, studied my ass off for the test. And it took me a couple times to pass. It was tough.
And it was to the point
You
where
also didn't have a construction background other than, well, I guess you did. You were project managing.
Yeah, I knew enough about what we wanted to do. Like, I'll be the first to say, I don't know anything about foundations. I don't know about roofing. Like, I know simple fundamentals.
Yes.
But
you know enough to be dangerous.
I know enough to be dangerous. Where my expertise comes in is in remodeling, and that's why we do what we do.
Yeah.
So,
are you, just for those listening, you're a remodeling only firm?
we are, as of right now, we are a residential remodeling firm.
But I would never say only at.
Yeah, that's why. I mean, the way you guys have transformed from
Yeah.
what you even become.
It is a goal for next year that we'll at least start. We won't have it finished. We know what that looks like, but we will start our first custom home.
For yourselves. Will it be your own?
Probably not.
Okay. Yeah.
Not there yet.
Yeah. Will it be a spec home or will it be a custom?
It would be custom.
It would be
Okay.
custom.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you pre.
In my ideal world, it would be spec. But
Yeah.
it will be. I don't see that happening this quickly.
And for those listening, I mean, essentially a spec home is on speculation. You would want to do it, I'm guessing, because you could control all the selections, all the design. You could really let it be your brand.
Exactly.
Right? When I started, I've been building for about 18 and a half years, and when I first started, I did a couple spec homes because how else do you get your name out there, and I wasn't nearly as fashion forward or into design. It was just, hey, I'm going to build a house. And halfway through, I'm like, this is amazing. I quit my regular job. I sold my Jetta. I bought an F-150. I got my builder's license. And that's what you do. You just build a house, I guess. And halfway through, I'm like, this is amazing. And so anyway, like you said, you look backwards.
Yeah.
And you're like, wow, looking backwards, these different milestones or these different events have led to where I am now. And for me, quality was really important. Early on, you're just trying to figure out your story. I mean, honestly, you're just... Compared to what I do now to then, I mean, it's not even a fair comparison. It's
Well, of course not.
your experience. But looking back, it's kind of like, in some ways, not knowing what you don't know can be a blessing too, though. I think one of the biggest barriers to entry for someone to be an entrepreneur is they think they have to know everything. And I don't think you do. I mean, even the podcast we're on right now, I was on Brad Levitt's podcast from AFT, and after I got done, I had so much fun. I enjoyed it, and I was a speech comm major, and I guess you just talk a lot, and you get a degree for that, which is weird. And thanks, Mom and Dad, for raising an extrovert. And I thought, well, man, I want to do this. And so within 30 days, I had started the podcast, and you guys are obviously episode number 11, and it's. Just go for it. And so anyone listening who wants to start a business,
go for it.
Get an idea, go for it. It's okay to fail.
And it's okay, where I think a lot of people fail, is they think that they have to be the expert in the room, and they don't ask questions. Yeah. I don't want to be if I'm the expert in the room, there's a problem.
That's so funny to say that.
So
now, when we're, for our company, are we the experts? Like, are we experts in design build? Yes. Are we the experts in the room with our team? Yes, but so are they in what they do. But we all ask each other questions.
I think that's very well said. I often use it as a joke, and because I'm sure in some ways you know more than you think you know. But it's a classic thing. If you don't know the answer, you know where to go. You know who to ask.
Yes.
And I think people, especially clients, appreciate honesty. I don't know the answer. That's a great question. Yep. Let me get back to you with a solution. And at our next meeting, I'll have a path forward. And I've often told my clients, like, look at my hands. These calluses are not from working on your house physically, because if you see me pounding nails, like, something has gone drastically wrong. Yeah. And then I usually laugh a little bit. But it's true. Like, that's not my skill set. My skill set is organizing the building, design. My mom was an interior designer. My dad was a builder. And, you just that's kind of how I fell into it. And one of my questions for you guys is, I've heard recently that you become an entrepreneur for one of two reasons. Either you are forced into it because you don't want to do what you're doing and you're like, well, hey, this boss or this job, like, I'm going to do it because of necessity. Or you become an entrepreneur because there are family members or inspirational pushes, or like, there's an idea of like, I want to do this because I'm surrounded by other people that are doing this as well. What was your path? How did you know you wanted to own your own business?
Well, I think Michael has always known that, like
Yeah,
since he was young.
And I mean, this isn't my first rodeo with entrepreneurship. I've had small record label, and I did artist management. My good friend Corey and I in Chicago, when we both like hated the agencies where we're at, we just said, well, screw it, we'll just start our own agency. Because they didn't want to do social media. They thought it was a fad. This is in like, I don't know, 2011, 2012.
So to that example,
and we did that.
You were forced into entrepreneurship because
Exactly.
you wanted to do something that you...
I think it's a balance of being forced into it and really having a passion and love for owning our own story.
Yeah, and I think for me personally, I love teaching. Like every aspect of teaching I loved, but I also loved the ability to be home with our kids when they were little. And then when I started to blog, I realized again, like the story going backwards, that I was teaching people, but in a different way. And I was like teaching people how to love their home and how to experience life in everyday moments, and like that you don't need to be an expert in design. You already know what you like. It's just a matter of me helping put that all together for you.
Out of curiosity, what grade did you teach? Second grade.
I love second graders.
It's funny you say teaching, because through the recession, I started in 2005, so like 8 through 12 essentially. For us, it was a rough time. In some ways, at the time, looking back now, going back to your reverse comment, I didn't have enough to lose to go out of business. So many of my peers and builders that were above us either had spec homes or they just had too big of a staff and they went under. I mean, I was extremely lean. I had no overhead. And so really one job, if you could just get one job, piecemeal another job. But anyway, at the time, going back to teaching, I always wanted to be a teacher had I not been an entrepreneur. And I just love kids. And this was before, I have 3 kids now, but before I ever had kids, I was like, I just love them. So in the state of Minnesota, unlike my sister was in Montana, she has a degree but not in teaching, and she did part-time substitute teaching. And I thought, this would be a great time for me to scratch that teaching itch. And turns out in Minnesota, you can't be a teacher unless you have a education license.
Yep.
So I called some of the old teachers that I had gone to high school with that I really thought a lot of, and I just said, hey, I'd love to do, I can't do teaching, what about coaching? They're like, well, there's a new high school opening up, and I was a cross-country runner. They're like, would you be the assistant head coach? I said, absolutely. So for 10 years, until my second one came along, and I just couldn't balance building and having a family and all these other things that we're balancing, but that was my outlet for being around children in this case they're all high schoolers, so it was really and running with them, and they are children. But I found it extremely empowering, to teaching, and sometimes you don't know what you have to offer until you see someone ask a question. And on a job site, I mean, how is it related to building or any business? It's just, I think educators have amazing talent. I feel like you guys just at baseline have way more patience. And I think
Michael will tell you that with our children.
I just think there's a lot of that. I think parenting, oddly enough, is very analogous to having any sort of business, building specifically. And while I don't look at my staff as like my children necessarily, like it's, I'm not their dad, they're not my son or daughter, but it's like you are encouraging them.
Yes.
You, not disciplining, but you are providing a framework of like, if you don't do this, then that doesn't work for us, our company. So in that sense, you're disciplining them. Positive reinforcement. Anyway, as more and more I get into just like, being a dad,
and a leader.
It's so similar to running a business.
Yeah.
And so just that family structure. And I think one of the secrets for our personal success, I believe, is that we're a fairly small company. We build 4 high-end homes a year and a handful of remodels, but we're able to use a lot of the same trade partners and subcontractors that also are family businesses. So for multiple decades, we've worked with the same people. And that creates a really unique connection between your peers. And I always say, like, this isn't yes, it's my company, my name is on it, but it's really, we are building this home collaboratively. And one thing that we did a couple of years ago is we'll take pictures of all the people on our that work on our homes, and like before we have like a parade of home event, I'll put all their photos. I'll put all their photos on the yard because I want.
You did that for the artisan.
I did.
Yep.
Yeah. I mean, I might be the front man, of a band, if you will. But at the end of the day, like, I can't do that with all the other people that are surrounding
that.
me.
Of course.
And I really want to give that recognition to those people. I also think it lets people know that, like, we value relationships.
Yes.
And, you know, these are people, these are craftsmen and women that are putting their craft into your home. It's just the home journey is so emotional. Remodeling and new homes, it's extremely emotional. And I think when people know it's kind of has this family bond to it, I think there's just a lot that goes into it that makes it appealing to our clients.
I would agree.
Yeah,
100%.
and of course I'm like jumping into your storytelling of that aspect through like the fact that you're showcasing who's working on their home. They also are getting just a little bit more in depth to the process of what it takes, and I don't know.
And it
that's
creates
where my brain
internal
goes.
champions for your brand.
I like that.
That's the big thing.
Yep.
And that's what's great about our team that we build, and we've been through some changes. And again, it's like, look, you know, they were challenges. There were moments, especially this year, we went through where it was very challenging. It was super emotional, but we had to make a change. Looking back, I mean, some of the best decisions we've made, and our team is super lean. There's 5 of us, including Danielle and myself. We are continuing to hire for another position or two, but our team is amazing, and they are champions for our brand. They know what we're trying to build. They want to be a part of it, and I mean, that's what makes us happy at the end of the day.
What are some of the roles that you have? You have 3 other people besides yourselves. Walk us through
Yep.
a little bit about some of the roles in your company.
So Matt is our GC. He's been with us forever. We're currently finalizing our transition from doing a lot of the build work to subbing out 90% of the
Oh, so
build
you
work.
self-performed a lot of your own work?
For
the
3
first
years.
3
we
years,
did.
yeah.
Wow.
And half
Both
this
of
year.
you, or your people on your team?
Michael.
Me, Matt, and then we had a handful of others that were internal and with us that are no longer with us, and we did all the work. And
And
it
then
was
obviously you
actually,
subcontracted out like trades like electrical and
Sure.
plumbing and things like
Yep.
that.
it was actually last year in Nashville at the first Contractor Coalition Summit,
Yeah.
which is part of the reason we're back. We'll talk about that in a bit. We had a call from our team that completely drowned in day 2 and took us out of the Q&A for day 3.
Wow.
And it was very stressful. I was not happy. I wasn't happy with the progress and what was happening. I just realized through the conversations with Brad and Nick and all the attendees, it's like, we cannot do this as at the time it was like a 7-person team. And have multiple projects going on, because all we're going to do is make clients upset because we're finishing one task, we're leaving to go finish another task at another job, then going from that job to another one.
It was like a very eye-opening experience for us coming to the coalition.
Realizing how
realizing
unorganized we were
how
because
we
we were
structured things.
we were chasing the draws,
Yeah.
and we were trying to get
The
as much,
financial draws.
Yeah.
and we were
Yeah.
trying to get as much done as possible. And then once we scaled back, we realized it's like most of our trades, they don't want to deal with clients at all. We've seen a lot of our subcontractors that were doing all the build and dealing with clients, they don't want to anymore. So that's where we come in. We have a great team of trades that we work with. Again, we use a lot of them on every single job, and it just makes our lives less stressful. And now Matt is transitioning fully out of that role, and he's got a baby coming in January, so it's like perfect timing for us to complete the transition, and we can perform better for our clients. And
So-
we can juggle multiple projects at the same time.
Yeah, so walk me through that. So you had multiple projects, you were chasing the draws, and for
Yep.
those listening, a draws, essentially once a month we'll submit,
Progress payments.
Progress payments, and just keeping the cash flow, the
Yeah.
blood of your company going so you can pay overhead and all those
Yeah.
types of things. It's really important. So are you doing one job at a time? Or how
At the time or now?
Well, when this bomb happened, right? You
When the
said,
bomb
well,
happened, we had multiple going on.
Yeah.
But again, we were self-performing on multiple. And we're talking a 3-person team.
Right.
And I'm out of town. I was the 4th. And it was just like, we can't operate like this anymore.
Yep.
So now we do have right now 3 active projects where we're on site. Actually 4 active projects we're on site. And we have another
We have
18
18.
that are in
18.
that are in pre-construction and
My
design.
goodness, that's
But
amazing.
that comes in with the design aspect too.
Yeah.
So we have some jobs that are just design only, and then we have some that are like custom builds where we're just doing
Like custom cabinetry.
a custom
built-ins.
cabinetry or something to that extent inside those jobs. But to answer your question on the rest of our team, we have a project manager, her name is Katie, and then we have a lead designer, and her name is Leslie. And then there's Michael and I.
Yeah.
And so
And another thing that we did coming from last year's coalition, earlier this year. I remember Nick Schiffer from MS Builders was talking about a CFO for hire.
Yeah.
And we got the introduction to that individual, and it was one of those things where it wasn't high priority, so we kind of let it drop. And then someone locally who does the same thing they reached out to us because we won some awards through Detroit Design Awards, and she reached out and was like, hey, congratulations, this is what I do, I'd love to connect. We took the call, and now we have a director of finance on the team.
Now you subcontract her work.
Yes, she's out. Yes. She does it for just designers and builders. That's all that she does. She won't take on any other clients.
It's funny, one of the benefits of the contractor coalition for both of our businesses, that's why we're here for both round two, is just not only the networking, the knowledge. I find there's so much value essentially out of the classroom, if you will.
Yep.
There's a ton in. I mean, there's the amount of information in these seminars are amazing. I know there's Builder 20 groups. There's anytime you can get education.
Yeah.
I think I didn't put a big enough priority on that early enough in my career.
Same.
And now it's like all in. Because, I love learning. I mean, I was a good student in college, but I don't feel like a lot of the stuff that I learned in college is helping me run a business. And that's a whole separate podcast probably. But I feel like these coalitions or anytime that maybe somebody listening is a trade partner, maybe they're a plumber or electrician, and I know you have to do continuing education credits, but there are things above and beyond that about running businesses that have been extremely game changers of how you structure something. Maybe something you've done for a decade, but maybe how you bill for it or how you look at it just slightly different, and all of a sudden now that maybe that pinch point is now a profitability point. I remember calling Morgan Molitor from Construction to Style, who was in Minnesota. I said, I'm thinking about coming to this coalition summit in Nashville. Is it worth the investment? Because that's pretty expensive.
Yeah.
And she said, you will get the value out of it in the first hour. And I'm like, that's a pretty big statement.
Yeah.
But I didn't want to read it on the website. I wanted her to sell me on it. Yeah. And I forget what she told me, and I was like, all right, I'm in. and she was. Within the first hour, it was how I charge on my design contracts. I essentially said, hey, if you do this, the design contract for us is like a way into the door, right?
Yep.
And it really protects us so we can do the design, but if we don't get the build, we're still paid for our services.
Yep.
Well, what I always did is I credited them that money towards the future build, which just made sense. It was like, hey, it was a soft way for them to say, get us in the door, then once you go, that deposit will go towards, you now, if they build with you, which 90% of them do, you were doing the design for free.
We used to do the same thing.
And did you change before you heard?
We did change beforehand.
And I was just like, I can't believe.
But the funny thing, guess who we talked to and decided that we were going to change that approach? Morgan.
It's funny because Morgan wasn't the one that presented that idea. I believe it was Brad Levitt at that time.
But and that's the thing I'll say about the coalition, something just our industry as a whole. The summit brought together probably 30 different people. And there are 20 attendees, and then there's a group of others that are around speaking, sponsoring. It's not just getting in with the sponsors and who are vendors and trying to get that relationship. I came in a little bit intimidated in Nashville because, you guys are some big deals.
There's
where you're at.
You look at
there's heavy hitters.
Yeah.
There's heavy hitters. And it's like, okay, well, we're kind of small potato, but we're going to do this. We know Morgan, she sold us on, so we did. And now we're back, and it's like we've known each other forever. And everyone here is great, super responsive. We have a blast, absolute blast. And I plan to come to all of them.
Well, I think that the beauty is that it gives you a ton of knowledge that you're not going to get elsewhere. Yeah. And you're not only sitting in on these conferences and getting that, but then like what you said, you're having these sidebar conversations. You're meeting in other people that are doing what you're doing or doing something similar enough that dialogue back and forth, and you're like, dang, why didn't I think about doing it that way? Yep. Or, oh, tell me how you're building this or how you're doing this. And just like having an actual connection with a person.
Yeah, and it goes beyond in person. There's so many relationships I've made where we DM each other all the time. It goes outside of construction. It's me posting something about how my diet's been off and my physique is off and I haven't been training like I used to. I'm with you, let's be champions to do better. And we're both down here again.
Right.
And it's that story came up yesterday. And in-person connections are amazing. It's obviously the way we all prefer to do things. I think most humans do. and through the pandemic, that was lost a bit.
We're all starved. We're all starved post-pandemic. We're like, we'll go to anything.
Yeah.
Humans.
How much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
All right, let's go. But it truly is, and the group of people is phenomenal, and it goes beyond the summit, whether it's a text, a phone call, a DM, we're all connected, and it's just a great group, you know? You're not going to learn everything there. There's a lot of value that's going to come after the 3 days.
I had like 35 pages of notes.
Yeah.
And when I got back, I was like, this is a question. I actually don't even know what I've implemented or not. Because, you get back into the grind.
Yeah.
And you're like, you're already a week behind and you're catching up on emails and you've got whatever going on and you're like right back into it. But the energy, some of the ideas I think are laying in your brain and then they come out in different ways. I went through maybe 2 weeks ago through my 35-page note list. I make it all the way through. And I was amazed at how much I crossed off that I had done. But I wasn't actually following, a little bit like back in high school when you would take a test. The teacher would allow you to do an 8.5 by 11 or a note card of a cheat sheet. So you'd write down all the formulas or whatever.
Well, your Remarkable is 8.5 by 11, right?
That's true. And you would never look at it because by writing it down, you committed it to memory.
Exactly.
And I think that the coalition, those notes for me was like, you absorb that information a different way. And then, of course, you're talking about it. And you're right. There were connections. There was a couple other builders that would call me. I'd call them. And then, we're all going through similar...
Yeah. Everyone who's in this business is going through the same stuff.
Yep.
Vendor problems, quality assurance problems, cabinetry. Everyone seems to be dealing with millwork problems. And I hate to say it makes us feel good, but it's validating that it's not us. It is a larger issue, and we're all going through it, and we just collectively have to figure out how do we solve.
I think the big thing, too, and I think our generation, I'm 42, you guys look younger than I am.
We're both near 40 right now.
Yeah.
Within the next 3 months, we'll both turn 40.
Next week.
Next week, all right, well, happy birthday.
Next
the reason,
2 weeks.
The reason I bring up age is I feel like the generation before us, they were less likely to communicate and be like, hey, what do you make profit for a year? How do you charge? What do you pay your employees?
Like it's a secret.
Like it's a secret, or they just aren't. And I would say early on in my career, even before I was aware of these types of events, I remember being told the advice was ask for help. Yeah. And I think there's something hardwired in people. Like if someone in a real way says, Danielle, will you help me? Almost everyone, you're not going to say no for two reasons. One, it validates your friendship. And two, if someone asks for help, I think pride is what keeps people from asking for help. And I think if somebody asks us, not only is it empowering, in some ways it's empowering to the person being asked. It's almost a gift to the person being asked.
Like you respect me that much to ask me for help.
Exactly. And I would say anyone that asks for help, you will. And you want to be respectful of people's time and those types of things. But at the end of the day, we're humans. You touched on it earlier, Michael. And I think people respond to that. I also think you can ask your clients for help, if you're trying to explain something to them. Yep. And I think because home building and remodeling is so, it is an intimate process. You're in somebody's home.
Oh, it's very intimate.
And it's very, sometimes too much so. But I think, it's just they understand you as a person. And I think at the end of the day, if you're picking a builder or a remodeler at the same strata, or frankly any business, if they're the same strata, they should be within 1% or 2% for cost. So you really shouldn't be making a business, or you shouldn't really hire someone based on cost, in my opinion.
I 100% agree.
You should base it on, do I think this person's values align with mine? Do they listen? Do I want to be around these people? And I kind of joke sometimes, if you don't like me, you really shouldn't hire me.
Yep. We say that with clients because we always do it in home consultation first. We charge for it. Yep. It's for two reasons. One, we get to see the home, walk through it, talk about any issues that we see, some ideas, and then we have a follow-up. But the main reason is, what vibe are we going to get?
Wait a minute. Back up. Tell me about that. So the first time you ever meet them, you charge them for it?
Yeah.
Okay, you have to tell me how this works.
So it actually started, probably 3 years ago, where we were getting so many calls and we were going on site and we were doing things and they just really didn't come into anything. And at first I was like, that's fine, we're growing. This is something that we should be doing, but what we quickly realized is because we do have a social media following, and that typically is where clients are finding us. That we were having people book us just purely so they could meet Michael and I.
Celebrities.
And like
did they make you sign stuff?
Literally, like
it was really weird because we're not that big.
Right.
We're not that
it was
big.
awkward, and like people were like, I'm like so nervous for you to be here, and but
It
then
was
like
weird.
they didn't even have a project or a scale, and so then we started
that's
chatting
weird.
again with friends in the industry of like, well, what are you doing? And so they started saying like, just charge for that. That'll weed people out right away. And so at first we were charging like $150, and then we were like, we still were getting so many inquiries, and so then we upped it to $250, and we were still getting so many inquiries, and then we upped it to $495, and we still are getting an insane amount of inquiries.
Yep. So the thing that we did recently, this year we overhauled the website from top to bottom.
Yep.
Brought in a team that's in the Metro Detroit area to build it custom for us. One of the things that we did is we created a contact form. Mm-hmm. And because we offer services that are interior design only, design build, custom cabinetry and built-ins, and content creation, we have basically four different budget parameters to choose from. So it's all based on
it basically selects people, kind of filters them,
and they still try to weave around and be like, oh, because our interior design packages start, the threshold is 10,000. So they'll pick that, and then they were like, oh, we need to take down a load-bearing wall, and we want to expand our footprint.
Do you think Leslie and I are going to do that for you? Because that's kind of terrifying.
Definitely not just interior design, right? But you know, the parameters in the contact form weeds a lot of people out right off the bat. But also, when people ask the question, was that $495 go towards my project? No. You're paying for our time, because our time is valuable, and if we're spending. If we're taking
both of us, Michael and myself.
20 minutes to 30 minutes to drive, an hour there, 20 to 30 minutes to drive back, plus it's the 30 minutes prior before driving and the 30 minutes after because you're not really dialed in, you're not in the zone. That becomes potentially a 3 hours out of the day. It's not just 1 hour, it's the entire crux of it.
Right.
And I mean, if you put all that into the mix, we're
You're
kind of
getting a good
undercharging,
deal.
but
that's amazing.
we have a great
and we know that a lot of other builders and things and designers don't do that.
How do you receive that payment? You send a DocuSign, you send a contract,
Venmo or QuickBooks.
Venmo or QuickBooks.
Yep. Venmo for business. The feds know about it. So does our CPA.
Yeah.
But I mean, we have a great success rate. We're 9 out of 10 that we go to
It's
see.
interesting, you know, early on in your career, I could speak for myself. I mean, you take any call, go anywhere.
Yeah.
That's a classic business, right? And then after a while, you're like, I don't need to do this for practice. I'm a professional. You know, you can't go to the doctor's office and get a checkup, you know, because you're interested in like, what's going on. Like, that you're running a business.
Yes.
And, you know, obviously, well, the way I do it, I shouldn't say obviously, because you're instructing me right now that maybe I should even change how I do this. But I will vet them with a phone call for 15 minutes. And just high level. And I used to not like to talk about price because, you know, I'm an eternal optimist. Every once in a while, you know, maybe once or twice every 10 years, you'll get someone who said their budget's way lower, and it turns out it's 5 times the high.
Exactly.
It's like, but so, you know, in your brain, you're like, well, that person could. You just don't know. But it's hard to run a business, you know, on those wishful thinking. So anyway, you have the call. You know, what's your time frame? You know, what kind of size of home are you looking at? You know, have you ever been in one of our homes? Are you a referral from one of our clients? Like trying to understand, like
all that's on our contact form, other than timing.
Yep.
So they can select. Obviously, they put their name, email, their address, so we can actually look up and see what the home looks like. Photos, they can attach pictures. Some people have reached out and they've sketched out what they want it to look like, or they have a blueprint from an architect that they worked with prior.
Yeah.
There's a whole section that they can fill out with, like, tell us everything, anything you want us to know.
Yeah.
And then we have
then
how did you hear about us?
Email.
What do you say when? Because I'm just thinking. Let's say it's a new build, and let's just say for me it's a $3 or $4 million build, and let's say they're interviewing like 3 or 4 other builders who none of them are going to charge for this service, and I would explain to them, say, well, we do charge, and here's why. It's my time, and then their response is, well, your peers don't, and maybe they're perceived to be a higher level tier than me anyway. What would be your advice to me to go back?
Then I literally would be like, well, then maybe you should move forward with them.
Mm-hmm.
Because
and then just essentially call their bluff or call it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because that's the reality.
Like, if you're going to spend $3 million on a home,
right?
What's
$500 to come and see you? Like, you're not even committed.
And that is the interesting point, because we have had those questions come up, and they'll select the parameters of $200,000 to $250,000. Well, if you're worried about $495,
right?
Do you really have that budget?
Mm-hmm.
because you're investing into this project from the start. You invested time to research, design builds. You spent the time to fill out the form, to attach the documents, to reach out, and now you're going to invest time in correspondence and potentially this in-person consultation.
We seem to be the only industry that just gives things away.
It is, and
You know,
I
like,
bet
when
you,
you think about
I bet you if
that.
you go to different parts of the country, like we're in California right now, and I asked, percentage wise, like what do they charge in California? And he's like 17 to 20%, which for new construction, which is significantly higher than it is in Minnesota. And remodeling, that'd be more in line with remodeling numbers were in Minnesota anyway. And I think there is something to be said about like what does your area and part of the country, what does it support? And so it's interesting. Obviously, I've grown up in Minnesota, and so I'm biased against this because I'm Minnesotan, so I'm probably likely to please that. But I might try it. It's interesting though, because like, what if an architect recommended a client to us? Now I have an architect who I also want to get, and to a relationship with them, and I'd be like, well, I'd like to meet with your client, but I have to charge him $500. I'm not sure that story plays really well. So
Well, here's another thing to think of. When somebody calls a plumber or an electrician for a really small issue,
they charge a trip charge.
They have a trip charge,
You're right.
and they also have a minimum charge.
Yeah.
So, which is usually reflective of the trip charge. But sometimes, if I don't know, the internal guts of a toilet need to be I don't know what it's called.
Replumbed or redone.
Whatever. 10-minute job.
Yeah.
You're paying $150 for that for 10 minutes and a $10 part.
Yeah.
That's just the business.
Understood.
If an outlet is gone bad and it needs to be swapped out, that could be $150 to $200 for a $5 outlet.
Right. But people are happy to pay it because they know like that's
because
just
that's a professional.
Yeah.
But when it comes to them spending on their home, and this isn't for everyone, but we do see this in our industry where sometimes someone's going to invest heavily in their home, it gets questioned what they're paying for. And we've gotten questioned too on like our fees, like why is GC and PM so high? Why is interior design so high? I understand the electrical, the framing, the insulation, the plumbing, I get all that, but why are these so high?
Understood.
Like, do you want us to keep the lights on? Show up. But
I would say warranty. I mean, you want me here. We have to in Minnesota. We have to warranty our homes for 10 years on the structure. And I found this out recently in a podcast interview that we are held to a higher standard than commercial buildings. Commercial buildings are like 5 years or less.
It's crazy.
It is crazy.
And I mean, I get it because people are living in the domicile.
And the lobby of it, it's a home.
Yep.
It's the American dream.
But you can say the same thing about commercial too, that you have all these people, different families. You could have 10, 20, 30, 40, 100 different families in a commercial space. And if that fails, that's a mass catastrophe.
Agreed.
It should just be the same across the board. Anyway,
Yeah.
we won't get into Minnesota law.
You guys obviously are husband and wife. You guys are the owners of your company. How do you handle conflict management between yourself? Does it ever come up within the company? Essentially, like how do you make decisions as a team? And how do you? I've always been interested in this in partnerships, especially when it's a husband and wife. How do you shut it down when you're on family time? Walk me through some of the things that
that last one we're still working on. Maybe on episode 111.
Yeah,
you'll have us back.
We'll come back
Okay.
and tell you. I think that the beauty is that Michael and I have always said that our relationship is the most important relationship in anything that we do. Like in our family, our relationship is the most important. In the business, our relationship is the most important. So really honing in on the relationship and like how we can effectively live, grow, develop together. So for that, communication obviously is key with everything that we do. We actually both see a therapist. We see her separately. We see her together.
That's beautiful.
And it's not marriage counseling. I mean, we see a therapist to talk about how we're feeling, where the stress is, where the anxiety is. For me personally, it's what tools can I put in my box that allow me to show up better and stronger for my family, my kids, my team.
I love this.
Yeah. And I mean, mine's the same. Like I definitely.
Is it the same therapist or
It
not?
is.
Okay.
It is.
And
so
the only
it's
reason she will see us together is because we're not there for marriage counseling. It
Well,
has nothing to do with
she'll
it.
see us separate and together.
Yeah.
Right.
Because
We have the
otherwise she sees like couples only together.
Right.
She's like, you guys aren't each other's problems.
Right.
But that's been super beneficial.
Yep.
How long
to the two
have
of
you
us.
been doing that?
3 years?
Um,
Close to?
3 years together. I started right after we started this. So I've been seeing her for 4 years. And that was just like an immediate necessity of owning your own company and realizing like, if you don't have yourself together, like everything crumbles.
Yeah.
And
and
again,
you get really personal with yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm a proponent for anyone any adult who's running a business, entrepreneur, or if you're even just a professional, you're working for somebody else. After what we've dealt with collectively the past couple of years with the pandemic, it is extremely beneficial from a mental health perspective to go talk to someone. You know, getting words out to someone who is not biased and not going to judge you, they're there to help you, is extremely.
Yeah, I think any human being should be doing that. But then as far as like how do we deal with like conflict within our team, we're just very direct. I mean, I'm a very, very direct person. Michael's a direct person.
I'm less direct than you. I'm working on it.
But it's kind of been one of those things like, well, we'll go home and he'll be like, well, why did you talk to me like that? And I was like, because that's how I talk to everybody. And he'll be like, okay, yeah, you're right.
Like, but I'm married to you.
Yeah. He's like,
I'm not just anybody. Does this matter?
Is this not a special ring of power?
He was like, but I felt like you were talking to me like I was your husband. And I was like, yeah, but I would have said that to Matt too. And so
I'm like, okay.
It's been interesting because our team was even just having this dialogue when we were doing an interview, and Leslie had said, she's like, yeah, they're a husband and wife, and she's like, but you never feel that tension. You never feel like a husband and wife arguing. And I was like, wow, that's pretty rad to hear. Like, you don't feel that way. Like, that's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
But and then we've also learned just to stay in our lanes.
Yeah.
So when it comes to business things, if we stay in our lanes, things run really smooth. Yeah. So if I stay in the design lane, I stay in the content lane, and Michael stays in the build lane, and he stays in the operational lane, things run really well. It's when we try to jump into each other's,
we don't
and then
micromanage.
sales together.
Yeah, we don't micromanage at all. I'm gonna give one story really quick that happened lately. I think it shows the strength of our team and how, like, I guess special it is of what we built. An issue came up with a client. The issue had been boiling over weeks and weeks and months and months. It progressively got worse. Someone we just couldn't satisfy and was extremely angry. It got to the point where she had just been very unprofessional to Matthew, as well as one of our tradesmen that was on the job, cursing, pointing out issues that weren't even work that we did. It just got it was toxic before, and then the pot boiled over. Matt had sent me a text message just saying, if this ever happens again, I'm out. So I said, call me. He called me, he told me what happened. I said, is the client home right now? Nope, they stormed off. I said, okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna pack everything up in the trailer, you're gonna hook the trailer up, you're gonna drive to the workshop and drop it off, and then you're gonna come to the studio and we're gonna talk. We all talked collectively as a team. If I had listened to my emotion at the moment, during that moment, I would have just fired off an email and said, we're done, see ya. Katie stepped in, she has a lot of PM experience. She said, I get it.
Katie's somebody on
Katie's our project manager.
She's our project manager.
So she stepped in and said, listen, I get it, completely get it. I think we should handle it this way. And she explained it. And that's how we handled it.
That's neat.
At the end of the day, we ended up, we fired the client. It went through 3 weeks of back and forth. We showed up on site to walk through everything.
I mean, we did everything.
We did everything we could
to solve it.
But
nobody wants to walk off a job site.
The point is, it wasn't Danielle or myself that said we're done. It was a collective team. It was all 5 of us that decided we're gonna take a loss on this. Not a huge loss, but we're gonna take a loss. But even what we responded to the client, we just said the mental health of our employees means more than finishing this job. We're not going to put them in a toxic environment.
How did the client respond?
To do it.
Well, the first time it was very interesting. I did it in person first, then I did it on a phone call.
So they were like, we're not letting you go. Basically,
so they tried to call it bluff.
In person, it was polite. It was a very understanding situation. On the phone, it became toxic, and she started yelling over me, and I asked her not to yell over me because I didn't talk over her. They got angry, and I said, you don't need to answer this right now. I'll email you. We'll follow up. So I followed up an email, and then it remained remained on email. They never called me
Right.
after email. So then I basically broke up with them 3 times.
Right.
But never did they pick up the phone because I think that they knew. I mean, this wasn't our first go around with them of talking
Right.
about what was happening on the
Right.
website.
I think it's interesting. We had a difficult client situation, and with a new home, well, I don't know if it's different, but we were about not even halfway through, a quarter through, and I started seeing some major red flags. And I tend to be someone I'm a peacemaker.
You're an optimist.
I'm Switzerland, and I'm not optimist, And
You're
so
trying to fix it.
it makes me very good at remodeling, by the way, because I can look at anything and be like, this can be amazing.
Yeah.
It also makes me very bad at buying property for myself, because I'm like, I can make this anything. You're like, well, that costs a lot of money to do that.
Yeah,
So,
and 7 years later, you're barely starting.
But going back to the, dealing with I have this, a lawyer actually, who teaches a continuing ed class, and it's called How to Deal with a Crazed Homeowner. And I had one of these for a year. And walking through how to deal, it was very difficult because they were having an unenjoyable time. And so was our team. Everybody was stressed out. And at the end of the day, like, I'm committed to building you for my own reputation and for what we do, like, I'm building this beautiful home. And regardless of how rocky this is, like, we're out to sea in a cruise liner. And even if I don't like the people that are on the boat, it's my job as the captain to get this boat to shore.
Exactly.
And I didn't feel like I could just walk away. Plus, I don't even know how you do that.
I don't know how you would do that
In new construction, because I can tell you this. Let's say I've been approached before where a builder was fired by a client, which seems to be almost an easier scenario. I don't know the legal parameters of firing a client from my point of view. Hopefully I never have to deal with that in my career. And I'll seek legal advice if I have to do that. But we were approached. The home was like halfway through, but I didn't want to take it on because how do you deal with your warranties? Am I absorbing the foundation warranties?
It sounds like a complete legal nightmare.
It is a legal nightmare, and in some ways, like, there are times where a contractor isn't doing what they should do. It really puts the homeowner in a difficult situation too, because let's be fair, both sides could be out of line. And let's just say the homeowner has to come find a builder. Man, we would have to charge a very high rate to take on this risk that we are now having to take on. And you hear these stories in the industry. Thank goodness we've never had to deal with something like this, where maybe someone's gone through a couple builders. We'll talk about a red flag. There's at some point, there's a problem. There's a continual pattern.
Yeah,
right?
and so with this client though, like, the beauty was, and there's no beauty in it, but like, we weren't leaving the house unsafe. Like, it was.
We were the punch list. Like,
you're on a punch list? Oh, that's totally
the biggest thing we had to do was grout a backsplash. That's
you're done with the job.
Yeah, everything else was done.
Scenario,
yeah.
But it's still.
Oh, for sure, but it still was.
It was awful.
Yeah.
It still was awful because that's not where we ever want to be.
And that's what's hard too, because I've had it before where I feel like people use my own reputation as a weapon against myself. And what I mean by that is, like, we're conscientious, we want to do a good job. Of course we care, what other people say, to the point of, like, of course you want a good reputation. That being said, like, if someone says, well, Mark is this, that, and other thing, it doesn't really bother me. It's like, I know who I am, I know what I do. But you still want a reputation of being good. Who wouldn't? I mean, it's,
And you just can't control what people are going to say when you're not around.
And I think through this process, there was a number of times where I couldn't call the client's bluff because I wasn't willing to kind of go to the test, of seeing it through. And at the end of the day, they like their home. I think just the process was very difficult for them, and they have a beautiful home. I think they love it, and I hope they do. And I've learned a lot.
Yeah.
One of my questions for you is, do you guys have a story of a time that you failed? I think you kind of just used one, but but essentially, tell me about when you failed and landed on your face. But when you failed, and at the time you thought, man, this is the end, or this is terrible. But then through the course of time, you realize that maybe have been one of the best things that's ever happened to me. And maybe it's the example you already stated, at the coalition when you had to walk out because the thing was blowing up while you were gone.
Yeah, and that was definitely an example, and that actually ended up being, funny enough, we've fired 2 clients this year.
Yeah.
That one happens to be.
This sounds really good. Oh my goodness.
Yeah. This was just a year, and again, no project is going to be roses.
No.
Skipping down the street, just put on
building
whatever
is hard.
magical movie scene that there is.
We're in one of the hardest industries there is.
Not only that, but we're coming out of a global pandemic.
Yes.
And people being cobbled up in their houses and stressed out, and we're charged from, you know, the political landscape every day, all day, and it's extremism. And we try, I know I do, try to give clients or just people in general the benefit of the doubt. Like, okay, they're having a bad day. They must be going through some things. Like, let's hear them out. Let's get it done. But when it keeps happening over and over again, there is no benefit of the doubt at that point. Like, there's a larger issue. We can't solve that issue. We can show up and do our job and do it really, really well. We are the experts. That's why you hired us. But unfortunately this year, was 2 situations where there was no way we were going to be able to please them. It was just unrealistic.
But I think in, like, going back to what you were saying is on both of those jobs, are there things that you've learned always? Yeah. I feel like anytime we fail, that's how we're learning. Any mistake that we have, that's how we're learning. And so, like, again, going back to us communicating so openly with our team and having those dialogues, like, what could we have done better to maybe prevent this from getting here? The one that Michael just told you about, literally, that they had occupancy of their house and they were mad
for months.
They were mad about a shelf. So
it's just that's unrealistic expectations.
Yeah, and they were mad about, like, a drywall scenario when you turned off the lights and you tilted your head. Like, those type of things where we had
to explain an 80-20 finish, and they were like, well, it should be 100. I'm like,
we were never going to win
in
that scenario. But it just, I think ultimately both of the issues that we've had recently come back to setting expectations. And how are we going to set these expectations, and what is this going to look like for us? And that's something that we're continually trying to build on, and, like, also recognizing that we can't control how clients are gonna set their own expectations, but what I can do is try to have those deep, hard conversations during those touch points that I know are sticky. And so we've talked internally as a team. We're working right now to try to figure out, like, I think that on our larger scope projects, we're gonna have 4 meetings where you meet with Michael and I in person. And, like, those will be during those hard points. And then our GC and our PM are also going to meet on site weekly.
How long are the durations of your projects?
I mean, the one project
I'm guessing they range quite a bit. But
the one project that we were just talking about, the one that we left, where there's still tile and grout. I mean, we had been on that job because it was a full form. No, but we had been on that job, like, pre-construction since 2020.
Oh my.
So,
do you charge, out of curiosity, in that situation? Are you charging hourly for your services, or how do you guys charge?
So for that contract, no, we're still trying to figure that out.
Yeah.
So we calculate how many hours we think it's going to take for GC and project management. Every contract, from an interior design perspective, there are hours, like a retainer of hours set in the initial estimate. And then if once that our retainer hits 75%, we will let them know. And usually they have to re-up hours.
So you're tracking your hours.
We are. And so,
are you using, like, Builder Trend, or what are you using to track your hours?
We're actually using a design software that's called Material.
Oh, they have really. If I was a design build firm that used that selection process, I was very impressed with how they presented.
We love that. It's a great.
Did you use them before that?
We were in contact with them before that, but we hadn't, like, fully committed because once you, like, fully commit to something, you have to dive everybody into it.
I know.
It's been a great platform because we're so design heavy for clients. Yes. Everything lives there.
It's very optically beautiful as well. I feel like, one of the reasons why Apple products have been so successful is the user interface is so intuitive. Yeah. I feel like, while I have not used Material, I just felt like, I was like, wow, this was. Yeah. I sent it to a lot of designers that I work with.
That's awesome.
Just to see if that was something that they could use, because I was impressed by it.
And then it's been awesome because obviously we know Mary Beth very well, and so, like, we can schedule calls with her and tell her, like, where we're having difficult times, and they've been just amazing that way for us.
But the one benefit too, I just want to cap on this, is through these tough situations, it has made our team dynamic so much better. And coming from corporate world where these situations with clients have come up, and there is no firing a $50 million a year client.
Right.
You just have to get it done, their mental health and their well-being.
Yeah.
So You can't win them all. Goal for 2023 is just
To win
knock it
all.
out of the park and make every client happy.
Yeah.
That's what we'll do.
I mean, it's always the goal. I mean, but
Yeah.
like any relationship,
Yeah.
I mean, both sides have to work on it, right?
Yep.
And so, I mean, anytime there's kind of this conflict resolution, it comes up in a lot of, every job. And, you sit down, you listen. My kind of MO is like, I listen to the client, you're listening to get it off their chest, and then, basically respond and say, I hear you, I understand what you're going through. And it's hard sometimes because a lot of times you want to defend your team or you want to defend your point of view, but it's a little bit, I mean, frankly, going back to the family similarities, that's a lot like having an argument with a family member, a spouse, and it's validating that person's feelings, and understanding that they're heard, and not being dismissive or coming. I think if you come out with like guns blazing, I mean, what's sort of unfair is I feel like the clients can kind of come guns blazing. I don't feel like we ever can.
No, you
No.
cannot.
And so you almost always have to find a path of, I mean, Switzerland has a great reputation, right? Everyone knows if I say, hey, I had to act like Switzerland, like you're being a peacemaker.
Yeah.
And so, you're just trying to find a way to settle things down. Because emotions are high. How do we get there? And there's, every client is different. But usually, if you say, I'm sorry, I say this all the time on the podcast. That's just something that's pretty core for me. It's a soft answer turneth away wrath. It's a verse in the Bible that I often think of before I go into a meeting, and I try to say it to get my because I might be worked up. I mean, obviously we all have our internal emotions, and I'm like, you're upset, or sometimes you'll see an email, like I'm really quick on responding. I'm gonna wait 24 hours before I respond to this because I'm not sure I trust my emotions right
That's
now.
something we've started doing lately as well.
It goes with, I think, just setting boundaries and like really setting boundaries not only for yourself, but setting boundaries for your clients and your team. And the more boundaries that you have, I think the overall better business owner you become.
Yeah. Kind of transitioning into a close here, how do you set boundaries between the business and your personal life? I mean, you have 2 children. You obviously are,
We do all the things together.
Yeah.
Yeah. All the things.
It is a challenge where we notice the challenge is like when we have date nights or the boys are put to bed or wrapping it up for the night, like we find ourselves talking about business all the time.
Yeah.
But
because it might be the only time you see each other that day. Are you often during the day doing different things? Because you might be on the job and you might be designing. You're not necessarily together.
we're not together 24/7 every single day.
Yeah.
We are in the studio a lot together, but just because we're there, we're doing 2 completely different things that day. So we're focused on different elements. We try, as crazy as it sounds, we really try not to open the laptop once we get home for the day.
Yeah.
It's hard, and it takes a lot more effort the following day to knock out the checklist, which, as you know, when you come in the morning, you got 50 things thrown at you right away, and it's like, well, I had this beautiful plan.
I have my list
had
to
the
cross
task
off.
list, okay?
Yeah.
But we make it happen, and some days we do have to open it up. Sometimes on the weekend we have to open it up, but we definitely and rarely do it together. So if she has something she's got to knock out, I'm focusing on the kids or dinner or laundry or whatever, and vice versa. I think every day, every week, we get a little bit better. It's very difficult because we do everything together. And I just don't, I think we heard this the other day too, that the work-life balance is kind of a farce. It doesn't really exist. But we balance the best that we can. Our kids are the most important.
I think it evolves.
Yeah.
I understand. I think balance is just that.
Yeah.
We did yoga today as part of a team building exercise, right? And so, you're holding a pose. Some days you're focused. Some days you can hold a pose, and some days you fall out of it. And it's kind of like, it's okay. I mean, but I think business is a lot like that. And like,
It is.
some days you're like, at the end of the day, you're shutting it down, and you're like, today was not what I wanted it to be, but tomorrow's a new day. And I think having a fresh
We have that
perspective, I
a
think,
lot.
is really important for any business owner.
Yeah.
And I think that for the 2 of us, it's just being really intentional with our time and what we're doing. And because we're together all the time, when it is, we try to schedule weekly date nights with the 2 of us, and like we give ourselves like that first 10-15 minutes that we can chat about work, and then we're like, all right, on to something else. Like now we're not talking about this. Or at home, I'm really good at not checking emails once we get home.
Yeah.
Michael's working on it.
I am working.
But like, I don't want to get myself fired up over something like that when I need to be present as a mom right now, and I need to be present as a partner right now versus a business owner right now. And so again, those boundaries of like, this is when I work, this is when I'm a mom, this is how I'm a partner,
and another
kind
layer,
of segregating my life in that way, because for me, if I don't do that and it all gets mixed up, I'm not doing myself any good, and I'm just spread too thin.
Another layer really quick I'll add in, about, I think it was on our 10-year anniversary, we went to a health and wellness retreat called Savannah, which is in Carefree, Arizona.
I recommend that.
Coolest name ever. And we turned all of our notifications off. Since we've gotten back, those notifications have stayed off. No social media notifications, no email notifications. We get phone calls, texts, any health related things, but those notifications are off.
It's interesting you say that. I watched The Social Dilemma, which is a well-known movie, right? Just about the prevalence of social media, your phone, all those things. And I try to set parameters as well. But ever since then, which was a couple years ago, you can't get a hold of me unless you call me. I turned off, and I found it was so unproductive to hear the ding, ding. You sort of resent that sound of emails.
You don't even do text?
No, I don't want to do text either. I don't actually like texts unless it's...
Do you just have text turned off on your phone completely?
You mean the noises?
Or just text in general?
No, you can text me. But I think you get into a habit, like you check your phone fairly, when I get up and if I'm walking downstairs, I mean, maybe it's no different. I think it becomes like a trained habit. You can't interrupt me with a text, but I'll just like naturally look at it fairly regularly. But for me, texts are, I'm running 5 minutes late. I'm,
it's not a place for a full conversation.
And we're certainly not the first person that has this problem, but a lot of times clients in the heat of the moment will take a picture of something, send you a video, and, I tell my staff and my team, don't respond. Or I'll just say, please put this in an email so that we can better track it and better serve you. Which is true, number one. And I really do make it clear and that, for us, since you talked about the family, for me, I'm home every day at 5. We have dinner at 5:30. I never email at night. I don't, it's just that, and I tell my clients, I think your point about setting expectations, I think because a lot of our clientele either has families or have had families, I think they understand and can relate to that and they really respect it. I think it actually elevates your brand.
Agreed.
And there are times, there's always exceptions to a rule where something just needs to be done, or maybe you did something during the day that wasn't work related. You're like, well, now I have to squeeze it in, and that's up to me. That's on me.
Totally.
But I just don't think you can be the energetic self, the fresh mindset. I mean, we all need downtime. We can't have it on 24/7.
No, and you can't come in fresh the next day if you're working all night.
And something needs to inspire you. And I guess maybe in a closing question, I've never asked this before, but it's coming to mind right now. Tell me one thing that inspires you to be better at your craft.
Oh.
That is a good one.
One thing that inspires me to be better at my craft. Really gonna leave me.
The first thing that comes to mind for me, what really inspires me is knowing that our 2 boys are experiencing a life completely different than what we did. The values, the work ethic, the tenacity that they're witnessing and that we're instilling in them is going to build them into 2 incredibly powerful human beings. And we're also showing them that they can do whatever they want.
Dang, I should have went first.
That's a good answer.
Dang.
That's good. That's
all right,
a mic drop.
turn. I know. That's why I try to always post on Instagram before Michael posts. I think for me, what inspires me is just the continuous development, knowledge of that you can do anything and that you don't have to necessarily have a degree in what you're doing to be really good at it, and that you can chase your dreams and those dreams can change throughout your life. That what you made a decision at 18 or 19, that doesn't have to be where you're stuck for the rest.
Doesn't define you.
You don't have to be stuck there for the rest of your life. And I think that so often people they get committed to this is what I went to school for and this is what I had my degree in.
Well, I'd answer the question as well, I guess. One of the things that inspires me is, and I think Michael's answer was amazing, and I think that's something that I need to give more thought to. I was inspired by obviously seeing people in my family that were entrepreneurs, and so it's this empowering idea that for us, it was always, if you can dream it, then you can achieve it. And I think a lot of people think you have to be able to achieve something before you can dream it, but it's nonsensical. You have to dream about something before you can actually do something.
Yes.
Yeah.
And certainly
That
there's a lot.
visualization, man.
Yeah, there's a lot of, they always say like write down your goals or you'll never achieve them. And they have these crazy stats. I don't know how you track these stats, but they're like 80% of goals that are written down will be accomplished.
Yeah.
But it's
But
true,
yes,
because if you
it
don't write
does.
them down, like how could it ever have been born?
Yeah.
Totally.
But I guess for myself, I'm really, and I would say passion and empowerment by our peers and those around us that inspire us to be better. And I don't look at people in my own market like in terms of jealousy or envy. That's never been something that really drives
Agreed.
me. I'm really empowered and impassioned, like, that is amazing.
Yeah.
It makes me want to be better. It makes me want to do better. And I think a lot of things in terms of sports, that person is much better at basketball than I am. I really want to work on my shot so that I can
you're
be that
really,
good.
really good.
Well, I'm not sure who would pay you to say that, but I think when people can look around it, and I think that's what can be very good about social media, but you have to be careful with it. And it's not something that affects me, but I know people that it does, where they've actually had to get off social media because it damaged their perception and their self-value, and they spent there's too much time looking at other people, and it brought them down. And I can,
so sad.
and I would feel terrible if that was what you felt about it. And this isn't a great thing about myself. I'm just saying, like, I'm so inspired. When I see a great photo, and you mentioned this, the group the reason we're out here.
Yeah.
Like, anyone that's here is like, they post something big or small. There was a remodeler, he was just starting. I mean, he was like doing everything himself. And it was like, what he was posting was inspiring to me, even though from a strata level, it wasn't the same. That wasn't the point.
Exactly.
Like, I loved what he was doing, and like I was so encouraged that he was like going and getting it. And when he got home, he's like, "I'm doing this, this, and that." That is empowering.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think everything about this coalition has sort of been, collaboration
Yes.
over competition.
Yes.
And we're hearing that more and more in the industry, and I think it's so healthy and so empowering. And thank you very much for making the time to come on our podcast. And
Thank you for having us.
we're going to have to bring you guys back because you guys
Yeah.
are awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks,
All right,
appreciate
guys.
it.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
That's it.